Hi, I'm Ann Hyatt, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to tune into my South by Southwest talk today. We are going to be talking about future-proof career strategies. And I think after the year we've just experienced, all of us need this a little bit in our lives. Now, for me, future-proofing our career is more about removing mental barriers than anything else. This talk isn't going to focus on going into STEM careers like science, technology, engineering, and math, or how we're going to compete with robots in the future. For me, in my experience, there's actually not a correlation between the highest paid jobs or the highest growth industries in happiness in your work. What we really want to seek out to future-proof our careers is finding something that fills you up, that gives you that joy, that pulls you instead of you having to push it. Lack of happiness in your career is not future-proof. So we're going to focus in on that, of creating some opportunities, getting outside of our comfort zones, and really creating something of which you can be proud. Now, future-proofing also means consistently doing things that we've never done before, and that can feel a little intimidating, but I promise you it's more of a mental barrier than anything else. I think a great analogy of this is the 4-minute mile. So from the beginning of time, since we've been measuring foot races, we thought that running a mile faster than 4 minutes was physically impossible. 1.6 kilometers or 4 miles is a long way to go that fast. But it wasn't until 1954 when Roger Bannister finally broke this barrier that we realized it was just a mental barrier rather than a physical one. And that is proven by the fact that just 2 months later, Bannister himself and John Landy broke that record again just 2 months later. This 4-minute barrier was a mental barrier because it has since been broken by over 1,400 male athletes since. And what I think is most interesting about this is that pace is now the standard for all male professional middle distance athletes. Think about that. What used to be considered impossible is now the standard for athletes at this level. I think that's very analogous for our careers and growth in industries as well. So turning challenges into pivots and changing our mindset is truly what puts us in the driver's seat to achieving even greater success than we might have thought otherwise possible. So I started my career at Amazon in 2002, working directly for Jeff Bezos as my first real job out of university. And that was the time just a year or so after the original dot-com bust. It was a time of great pivot and reinvestment. Then I experienced that kind of disruption again while working for Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO of Google during the 2008 economic crisis. And then again, after I founded my own company in 2020, we all experienced this global pandemic and pivots again. I've had a lot of experience to watch some of the greats and to coach some of the greats into doing these reinvestments in themselves to keep themselves future-proof and really relevant in a rapidly changing world. I've created something that I call personal ROI to guide us through this process. And in this definition, ROI doesn't have the traditional definition of a return on investment, but instead it is recognize, own, and implement. First, we're going to recognize where do we want to go and who do you want to go there with. Second, you're going to own it. We're going to be reinvesting in our skills, up-leveling our knowledge, improving our networks, and encouraging some pivot moments along the way. And third is implementing it. This is the process of regularly creating an action plan and being very purposeful instead of reactionary in our careers and where we want to go. So let's dive in. The first is recognize. This is the part where we're going to define success for ourselves. You're going to set up your own personal vision and mission plan for who, what, and why you want to accomplish. And having that established is going to guide the decisions that you make, the risks that you take, and lead you towards this North Star goal of yours. So first is who. Who do you want to be serving? Who's your ideal client or customer or audience? Second, what do you want to put into the world? What is this legacy that you want to be setting for yourself? And third is, why is this important to you and important to those who you want to receive it? By creating this clarifying personal mission statement, you'll better align yourself with the industries and opportunities that are going to get you closer to that. And that passion will really draw you forward and keeping you on the forefront of your abilities and keep you very future-proof. Now, I learned this principle of betting on yourself, which incidentally is the title of my book coming out this year with HarperCollins. So watch this space, please. But I learned the principle of betting on yourself by watching Jeff Bezos himself. I joined his team just shortly after he had taken the huge risk of leaving his very lucrative, very successful job at D.E. Shaw, where he was one of the youngest people ever promoted to leadership in the company's history. It was very comfortable. No one would have blamed him if he had stayed there his entire career. It was prestigious, it was paid really well, everyone was really proud of him, but he had this voice inside. When he saw this thing called the internet, he saw an opportunity that he didn't think would ever come around again. He had this idea to create this bookstore, and famously, we know what that became, but also famously, he took that to his bosses and invited them to invest in it, and they declined. So he had to take the really big step and the huge risk of risking it all, moving himself to the other side of the country from New York to Seattle, and starting this company in the garage of a rental home. He was doing something he'd never done before. In fact, no one had done before. And he really was sure that it was worth taking a chance. And when Jeff is asked, how was he brave enough to take that risk on himself? He describes this as his regret minimization principle. And this was when he was having a conversation with his future self. At the end of his life, he imagined that he would be more disappointed if he hadn't taken a chance on this thing called the internet than if he had and failed. I think that's exactly the right framework for us to ask ourselves when we're feeling a little hesitant about taking a big risk. I think we'll be more upset with ourselves if we didn't take it and didn't invest in ourselves than if we did and failed. For me, I'm not a natural risk taker like Jeff. I probably wouldn't have been brave enough to do what he did, but I can do that in a little bit more analytical way. So for me, this took the shape of creating a dream resume. I did this very early in my career. And my dream resume was a list of the accomplishments I wanted to have had by the end of my career, all the experiences that I desired, the networks I wanted to be part of. But equally important was what was not on my dream resume. And it wasn't about titles. I didn't put any titles on there because I found that to be more distracting than a guiding light to lead me to the opportunities that would bring me the most advancement, challenge me, and to get me closer to what was really fulfilling for my personal mission statement. Once I had this dream resume of the accomplishments and the experiences I want to have, I then sought out avatar mentors. Now, my avatar mentors are people who probably don't know I exist. Actually, I'm positive none of them know who I am. But I looked at people who right now are doing the things that I hope to do 20 years from now. And then I researched, how did they get there? How did they get invited on that stage or published in that journal or in that network? And then it gave me an opportunity to reverse engineer their current accomplishments into action that I can take today to get myself one step closer to where I want to be in the end. And this is very much about your networks. Most of my big breaks and opportunities and projects have come through the people in my circle. And I learned this by watching Eric Schmidt. Eric is really good at cultivating not only his strong ties, but his weak ties to bring himself to the next level. Now, social scientists explain strong ties as people who are very similar to you. They maybe went to the same university, come from similar backgrounds, speak the same mother language. And then you have your weak ties, where it's someone that you just maybe have one or two surface level things in common with, maybe the same sports team or favorite author. And that gets your conversation going. But then they enrich that conversation from a different perspective or background or experiences, and they enrich your thinking and challenge you to ask some questions that you might not have asked yourself otherwise. And this is when game-changing opportunities come to light. What I really look for when considering a role or an industry comes down to really three common traits that have served me well over my career journey so far, and I'm going to double down on in the future. First is I look for a pattern of reinvestment. Is this industry or company highly invested in continued education and training? Are their employees experiencing up-leveling regularly? Second is a pattern of innovation and grit. Do the people in that industry or company demonstrate behaviors of risk-taking? Or is it a group of highly engaged, hardworking people who are going to inspire me to raise my personal bar? And third is I really look for a lack of complacency. If you want to future-proof your career, you need to be surrounded by people who are curious and constantly pushing the edge of their abilities and learning. Satya Nadella when he was describing his turnaround of the culture at Microsoft, described really wanting to harvest a culture of learn-it-alls and not know-it-alls. For him, he did not want any of this complacency of assuming that you are great and you always will be. He really wanted people who are going to seek out that next level. So the second in our ROI is owning it. This is where we reinvest and reinvent ourselves over and over again. This allows us to know when to take risks. None of us want to waste our times with unnecessary failures, but in this process, we can really know and take at least an educated guess about where to put our resources and our time. I saw this exemplified while working for Eric Schmidt when he was CEO. After 3 years of being on his team in the C-suite, he transitioned from being CEO to executive chairman. Now that was a bit of a calculated risk because Google had never had an executive chairman before and Eric had never been one before. So we were both having to define what success looked like, what were the right rooms that he needed to be in, environments that our team needed to invest in, and how were we going to define success and our impact. This was a really proactive role to take when a lot of people at that career use that chairman transition to be semi-retired, but that is definitely not what he did. If anything, he 10x'd his output because he was then untethered from headquarters and the traditional responsibilities of a CEO and able to get out into the world, watch technologies being adopted in unique ways, looking for these emerging trends and patterns, and being able to use that to inform the company decisions as we were growing from Google and expanding into Alphabet. The second part of owning it is really setting some new expectations for yourself and for those around you. And this is a pattern of teaching people how to treat you and think about you. Now, this can feel a little intimidating, probably more to you than those around you, because you're disrupting your status quo. You're going to take something that used to be really safe and you're going to disrupt that. You're going to step outside of your box or what people might be assuming about you or you about yourself. And you're going to be a little brave. You're going to reframe yourself and your abilities and your growth path. And this, I encourage you to take a proactive step and have what I call a promotion plan conversation. So whenever I'd start on a new team with a new manager, I would, in that first week, have a conversation with him or her where I would describe my growth goals, when I wanted to be promoted, what I wanted to be promoted to, and would invite them to be part of my team in qualifying me to be ready for that. I wasn't asking for anything I hadn't earned myself, but I wanted to know where were the deltas between my current abilities and what I would need to be successful in my future dream roles. And then we created an action plan. The projects I would need experience leading, the certification levels I might need, any opportunity to up level. And I created a roadmap from that, a literal checklist of tasks and experiences and abilities that would qualify me for those roles. And then I put in the hard work and the long hours, which is also an essential part of that. So third is about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, most of my career, I was in a room with very, very smart people in an industry that was changing daily, and it can be easy to be intimidated in those environments. But this is another opportunity to ask yourself, can I shatter my personal 4-minute barrier mentality here? Is this a status quo that deserves disrupting? Now, this is a way, if you're like me and you're very analytical, a good way of assessing your risk-taking tolerance is to look at your calendar right now. Really, literally do the math on how you're spending your time and add up what percentage of your day is spent inside your comfort zone. For me, I've found my sweet spot is not spending more than 80% of my time in my comfort zone. If I'm spending more than that, that means I'm getting a little complacent and comfortable. If I can get 20% of my day or my week in doing things that I don't really know how to do perfectly, that are going to challenge me or get me outside of my box or put me in a room I never would have been in before or demand a skill of mine that I haven't yet perfected, that brings me so much joy. This is where you need to take big bets on yourself and make some maybe intimidating goals. Back when I was at Google, I interviewed thousands of people to work there. And one of my favorite and most consistently accurate questions of assessing someone's grit and ambition was to ask them to please tell me about a goal that took them more than 1 year to accomplish. Now that intimidated some people because they maybe hadn't set that kind of a goal for themselves ever in their life. But those that had were absolutely the level of grit and tenacity and ambition that could perform at that level consistently. My team was ever evolving and we had to stay in that lane consistently. And I needed people who weren't intimidated by the enormity of a task and realized that time is going to pass anyway. So wouldn't I like to have accomplished this at the end of that time period? Now, if you get intimidated by this 1-year goal you've set for yourself, remember that being ready for a challenge doesn't mean ready to be perfect at it. This means ready to try. This means ready to jump in, make some mistakes, and learn fast. I really enjoyed watching a company evolve over the last year called Lunch Club. This is one of my favorite pandemic discoveries. And this company had to really evolve and pivot very fast during the pandemic lockdown. Lunch Club had been first designed as something that would get you out of the physical office and face-to-face with a new colleague. They have amazing AI that matches you with somebody that is that peer, that mentor, that inspiration that you needed that you probably wouldn't have otherwise met. It was that very real human connection I was so desperate for at the beginning of lockdown in 2020. But watching them pivot into an online version of that club actually increased their growth and impact and allowed them to spread in other markets and me as a user to connect with people all over the world in a way that wasn't possible with the original vision. So sometimes these shakeups and these forced pivots are for our own good. So lean into them when you feel yourself getting some traction. Now, the third and final element of our ROI is to implement. And I think this is the secret sauce to doing something seemingly impossible. This is going to provide you an opportunity to conjure up serendipity. I know it might sound like an oxymoron, but you can actually create moments of serendipity or luck just by having done the hard work of knowing exactly what you want for your future so that you're capable of spotting it when it comes by in its infancy. Other people are going to miss it. It's going to pass them by because they are not watching for it. But when you see these moments of serendipity, you're going to be ready. You're going to get in that room. You're going to join that network. You're going to pull up a chair and get a seat at that table because you know it's one of these irreplicable opportunities that you don't want to have pass you by. And across my career, that's taken 3 different forms. One, for me, it was getting in as an early employee at a fast-growing, ambitious company. That's when I joined Amazon. I was very young. It was intimidating, but I knew that that was never going to happen again. The internet was never going to be invented again. E-commerce was never going to be invented again. And I wanted a seat in that room. And that really changed my trajectory. Second is working for leaders that I wanted to become like. Getting yourself a mentor where you can watch how they command a team or a war room or a project launch is the best way that you can learn to do so yourself in the future. So surround yourself with the people that you want to become like. And third for me is really seeking out environments that are consistently going to add to my skill set tool belt. I wanted to be in the teams that required the skills that I wanted to master. And in the end, that's actually why I left my absolute dream job of working at Google after 12 years, because I realized in order to uplevel my game and to become like these CEO mentors I had had across my career, I too needed to make a big bet on myself and take that scary step of becoming a founder myself. And not only did I do that by leaving Google, but I also left Silicon Valley and the States and moved to Europe and founded my company here because that was the way that I could really challenge myself and serve the people in the way that I wanted to in this new environment. It has not been easy. It's definitely an example of a goal that's taking me more than a year to accomplish, but that's really so passion aligned and has given so much back to me. If I was going to summarize these principles into one simple statement, it would be don't get complacent. You really want to set a reputation for yourself for being the one who gets stuff done, who takes the right risks, who jumps into a project, and who is the one who challenges the status quo, not only for yourself, but for your teammates around you, that you're consistently the one up-leveling the game, giving everyone the bravery needed to take some calculated risks. And really the most important effectiveness that I've found is this makes you really memorable. If you're the gritty one getting all the hard work done and inspiring your colleagues, they're going to think of you in the future when they need someone like that on their team or in their company. I haven't had to apply for a job since that very first scary application to Amazon back in 2002, because since then, I have always been recruited into future opportunities. And that is because you're memorable when you're one of those who sit firmly in the driver's seat of your career and ask for what you think you deserve and qualify yourself through a lot of hard work. Now, absolutely did not do this alone. I am so grateful to have had some of the best mentors in the world in these CEOs I've worked for, but they themselves also have mentors and coaches. Bill Campbell was famously the most popular mentor in Silicon Valley. He mentored Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, the founders at Google, pretty much every influential company in Silicon Valley, because he was able to help them up-level their game and see their challenges in a new light and help them make connections in a new way. And think about it, even Olympic athletes who are quite literally the very best in the world at what they do all have coaches. So find someone who's going to invite this pushback, challenge your thinking, challenge your assumptions about yourself and your ability, and push you to be brave and accountable for these big goals that you've set for yourself. This, in my experience, is when we truly find joy and future-proof our careers within our industry, our company, and most importantly, with ourselves. And think about it, even if you set a big goal for yourself that's so scary that it feels like a 1 in a million chance that you would ever succeed, let's do the math. There's 7 billion people on this planet, and if it's a 1 in a million chance, 7,000 people are going to get that. So why not you? Why not take a big bet on yourself? Create this dream resume, take some brave steps to accomplishing it, and really find this joy that's going to drive you forward. Okay, that was a lot to process in less than 25 minutes, but I have taken the steps to put together a worksheet that will kind of guide you through this, that will help you know, where do I get started? How do I get started today on future-proofing my career? So if you go to my website, which is annhiatt.co, or ANNHIATT.co, click on the talk link and you'll be able to download a worksheet that will help you not only remember everything that I've talked to today, you don't have to take notes, but will actually give you some extra steps, the way to implement this and to really make this part of your new daily routine and the way that you put yourself firmly into the driver's seat, regardless of the disruptions that life might bring in the future. I hope this resonated with you. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Please connect with me on social and enjoy the rest of your South by Southwest experience.